Gavin Newsom's polished image was recently torched by Gutfeld, who left behind nothing but smoke, conceit, and a frozen smile that was unable to endure the conflagration. Gutfeld shattered Newsom's duplicity, ridiculed his weak ideas, and revealed him as a governor paralyzed by the fire of a prime-time monologue in a takedown so brutal it shook liberal strongholds. This was no light-hearted roast. Every wall was being smashed by a political wrecking ball. Newsom didn't even anticipate it. Here at Gutfeld completely unleashed, the truth explodes rather than merely stings. Newsom's therefore tired of the criminality, the urban deterioration, and tent cities. No, that things doesn't make him angry. He's upset that you saw. It would be like a criminal apologizing to a jury for robbing 25 banks, when, in reality, he is only sorry that he was apprehended on the 26th. Because this isn't a crisis that just happened. Like Fox and Friends or Chernobyl, it is a man-made disaster. Applause. It started off on Gutfeld's stage, just like any other night. A coffee mug in his hand, the bright lights blazing, and that cunning smile curving across his face like a sword ready to strike. However, this was not the usual teasing. Furthermore, it wasn't the typical mix of light-hearted jabs and clever quips. Gutfeld was in full combat mode tonight, and he had California's polished political prince, Gavin Newsom, as his target. The man with the flawless hair does more campaigning than he does, who walks confidently into news conferences, as though each podium were his own private runway for a high-end magazine cover. But this time, Gutfeld's ruthless spotlight was set to tear apart the meticulously planned glitz. Used common sense as his advantage. No location exists outside of it. Yes, exactly. That's why, like you, Jamie, they're caught in this terrible, terrible place. It must remind you a little of your own life. You know, as California crumbles. Yes. Standing in Gutfeld's line of fire was the ultimate billboard of progressive perfection. So if you're impressed by this takedown, hit subscribe. There are times when I watch footage of California and think, oh, look how much better it is than my life. Or, at any rate, the part that Gavin Newsom enjoys playing. However, beneath that shiny exterior is a mound of failures that are more numerous than unpaid tickets. Furthermore, Gutfeld did more than simply identify them. With the accuracy of a late-night comedian tired of cliched showmanship, he destroyed them. Like an abandoned Hollywood screenplay, he tore apart Newsom's meticulously manicured image. Overhyped, flamboyant, and in dire need of a revision. Since Newsom has been riding high on his golden boy glow for years, let's travel back in time. Gutfeld, however, was there to rip off that glistening exterior and expose the decay beneath. Why am I constantly bringing up Gavin? Apart from my admiration for his role in American Psycho, he is beginning to disassociate himself from the worst aspects of his party. Newsom once declared that his state would be a haven for anybody who sought it, despite his hatred of fossil fuels and his ability to lower petrol prices by wringing out his hair. Then, in fact, people arrived. He smiles like he's in an advertisement for toothpaste. He struts as though California were a perfect paradise that he created himself, and he uses jargon like he's giving the keynote address at a TED lecture. However, beneath the choreographed briefings and glitzy dinners is a reality that is descending into anarchy. Gutfeld had no intention of allowing that delusion to remain unchallenged. You could sense the change in energy in the air as soon as he took the stage. There was no warm-up or soft landing, just a harsh shock of reality that was able to sever Newsom's well-defended ego. Gutfeld made it quite evident that the well-rehearsed performance was merely a front, and his vicious monologue caused the illusion to crumble. Chaos and devastation result when authoritarianism and order are confused. Therefore, the Democrats are now the party of disorder, if re-establishing order is bad. It turns out that wokeism was their only system. It destroyed any foundational values the party had in the first place. So, like Gavin himself, they are stuck staring at the burning aspirations of 2028, and nobody will assist them in extinguishing it this time. Gutfeld portrayed a harsh picture of California, the so-called model that Newsom holds up as evidence of development, tearing away the glossy exterior to reveal the decay that was festering underneath, now resembling a state that is crumbling under its own weight. While taxes have skyrocketed to the point where Elon Musk virtually took flight and fled to Texas, streets have become expansive tent communities. Furthermore, the truth was already awful when it came to crime, so Gutfeld didn't even need to exaggerate. Storefronts were reduced to broken glass displays due to smash and grabs. Carjackings are becoming nearly as frequent as placing an Uber order. Newsom, however, clings frantically to his golden fairy tale despite all the debris. Like a man who won't acknowledge that the kingdom has already burned down, his past performance as mayor, lieutenant governor, and governor is the issue. You also make excellent analogies. Mine, I believe, are superior. And simply wait. Here's why. When he sees the homeless encampments obstructing the walkways, he adds, "You guys clean that up." He started it. He spent $3 billion to fix it. He arrives at the fires and declares, "Who the hell caused this? I'm going to crack down on the people responsible." When he was hired in 2020, he spent $1 billion and said, "It's a disgrace. The richest state in the country and the richest nation of the world has a homeless problem. I will fix it." He points the finger at the mayors when it isn't fixed. Additionally, he used high taxes to drive Silicon Valley and the film sector out of the nation's best state. It's the worst performance I've ever seen. Nevertheless, I believe he is the most likely candidate to receive the Democratic Party's nomination. Yes, that is accurate. It's accurate. No one else was available. You're welcome back, Sherrod. Newsom, however, somehow managed to have the gall to lecture other states, talking about leadership, freedom, and morality as though he were America's guiding light. Gutfeld, however, increased the flames at that point. This was more than just hypocrisy. The theater was flawlessly polished. The expensive actor who was fumbling with his own script was Newsom. Gutfeld exposed it. The governor was criticizing Texas for its abortion laws and pointing the finger at Florida for book bans when his own state students were struggling to read at grade level, and his streets were flooded with fentanyl filth and lost lives. The crowd could sense the irony cracking so strongly. As Gutfeld struck with razor-sharp sarcasm that went deeper than fury could ever, laughter rose instead of anger. The finale then arrived. In front of everyone's eyes, Newsom's stage, his limelight, and his alleged opportunity to shine were destroyed. Newsom expressed his anticipation last week that the conservative Supreme Court will strike down the legislation that currently prevents his state from clearing away unmanageable homeless encampments. Consider that. Well, Gavin, what did you anticipate? That Winnebago was where the sanctuary seekers would arrive. Another instance of a well-known lib using his large mouth to write a check that his ass cannot cash. Newsom tweeted this last year, following Texas Governor Abbott's directive that parents of transitioning children should be the subject of a criminal investigation. Instead of being singled out by the government, trans children and their families should be honored. They are heroes. Therefore, California's door is always open to families who are currently afraid in Texas. Gutfeld portrayed a merciless portrait with that wily smile. The middle class in California was disappearing more quickly than a drop of water in the desert. While Silicon Valley tycoons and Hollywood stars enjoyed champagne behind their guarded gates, little firms were permanently closing. Despite everything, Gavin remained cheerful and well-groomed, as though the difficulties he was facing were merely the backdrop for his upcoming glossy campaign commercial. Gutfeld, meanwhile, wasn't looking for simple chuckles. Despite all of his photo opportunities and well-crafted sound bites, he revealed that Newsom was more than simply a fault. Families were being driven out of the state by him. Individuals weren't departing voluntarily. They had to escape in order to survive. Even longtime locals were left incredulously perplexed. How did he oversee California's decline to this point? In your opinion, what is Gavin Newsom? What is happening there? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they managed to remove Kamala from 6. They just put a white man in there and removed her. Her ego is too big for her to just put aside. If they try to do that, she will lose her mind. They also had a solid 2% support rate. So, keep that in mind. Yes, but all she wants is for that position to just become available to her before you insert a white man. That's right, they did it to Bernie, and I'm not sure how they'll put it. He was thrown under the bus after running for president twice in a row. He recently received 2 additional houses in Vermont. Proceed. Yes, you have some extra cash, but I'm not sure how they could use her. She really liked buses. Therefore, it would be fantastic if they chucked under the bus. Never faltering in his pace, Gutfeld set his eyes on the man in charge of California's sinking ship and began to remove the illusions, tearing them down piece by piece like a magician's trick going backwards. The expansion of the economy. All that Newsom boasted about was smoke and mirrors. His climate leadership has devolved into ostentatious news conferences and meaningless gestures encased in solar panels. Even his sympathy turned out to be a contrived display that ended as soon as the cameras stopped rolling. Then followed the blow that was more piercing than anger itself. Newsom's California, Gutfeld said, was like a house with immaculate windows and well-kept gardens. However, as soon as you enter, the foundation cracks, the roof leaks heavily, and the walls are covered with mold. Decomposition was concealed by a dazzling shell, a mansion that collapses under the weight of its own shortcomings, supported by slogans and memorable phrases. And Gutfeld said it for what it was at that very moment. California by Gavin Newsom is a brilliant catastrophe wrapped in progressive paper. Not because he exaggerated, but because he finally spoke out loud what so many already knew. The audience gasped and then laughed. California wasn't a shining example. It served as a warning. In the past, Californians sold celebrity home maps rather than landmines. In order to prevent hepatitis in their shoes, travelers now play hopscotch instead of touring. Residents are labeled cruel when they voice their complaints. We are now expected to believe Gavin. Absolutely not. His and his party's lies were the root cause of every issue that has arisen in the past 10 years. There was no punchline that made the audience chuckle. And it came from Gutfeld, as sharp as a knife. Convinced that no late-night host could ever frighten him. Gavin, meantime, probably flashed that polished grin while posing at velvet-draped podiums or relaxing in luxurious hotels. However, he was mistaken. Completely incorrect. Not only did Gutfeld scratch the armor, he turned a joke into a full-scale demolition by tearing it apart and marching through the rubble. And an even more terrifying thought emerged from the debris. Newsom's hints about wanting to be president. This went beyond simple ineptitude and hypocrisy. It was the blatant scheme to spread the upheaval in California across the country. Gutfeld made it obvious that a nightmare could not be ignored. America was the next test subject for Newsom, the lab-coated mad scientist. If California was the experiment, a terrifying idea that left the audience speechless. But Gutfeld remained resolute and refused to allow the catastrophe to continue. The nationwide polling by resounding majorities followed. Americans, it turns out, are not in favor of minors transitioning. Therefore, Newsom defeated a California bill that would have required judges to give preference to the parent who supports a child's gender transition last week. The measure was canceled more quickly than a late-term abortion. Yes, I am aware of it. Oh. The left, of course, was furious, but they were missing something, because Newsom now claims that he only vetoed it because it was already law. Gutfeld has no intention of letting Newsom get away. He concluded with a deadpan microphone drop. He was the only one who could deliver. A slow drink from his mug, a cunning grin, and a sharp look into the camera that said, "I see you, Gavin," were all very evident. And this catastrophe cannot be concealed by any amount of gel. The takedown was noteworthy, not only because of the chuckles, but also because of the pain of the truth, and the terrible precision. The way Gutfeld used only humor and hard facts to shatter the shining myth of Gavin Newsom. No yelling, no slamming of the desk, no theatrics, just sarcasm, honed into a scalpel that cut with ease as reality took care of the rest. And it was devastating because of it. He pulled his audience right into the desolation of San Francisco, where billionaires were walking across human waste on their way to supper. Additionally, the breakdown of law and order itself caused firms to close rather than competition. With that cunning smile, every detail blasted into the room, making the picture indisputable. California by Gavin Newsom isn't a model. The entire country can see the danger flashing on this neon warning sign. Gavin asks himself why the Democrats lost. Both the electoral vote and the popular vote went to the opposition. The fact that we were crushed requires humility, grace, and an understanding of the reasons behind it. Was the incumbency penalty the reason? Was inflation to blame? Did interest rates play a role? Was immigration the cause? Did it happen because we were too, quote, woke? Were problems with Israel the reason? Was it everything mentioned above? We're going through that forensic, I believe. At the same time, we must realize that we must fight back against the Trump administration's headwinds and white waves. He is perceived by voters as the archetypal wolf concealed by a thick layer of hair gel. Gutfeld pinpointed that hypocrisy with extreme accuracy, revealing how Newsom closed small businesses, churches, and schools while enforcing masks and lockdowns. As if the restrictions were solely for the lesser people, he himself sulked and ate at the French Laundry, without a mask while clinking glasses with the affluent. Gutfeld did not have to yell. He allowed the crowd to burst out laughing at the injustice by leaning into the ridiculousness. Not because they were jokes, but because they were indisputable facts that everyone understood but few dared to voice. The punchline struck home. The picture of families departing California, in large numbers in search of states where their leaders did not treat them like liabilities, then appeared. A somber migration that resulted from misguided goals and ineffective leadership. Furthermore, Gutfeld's strike was brilliant since it went beyond the facts. It was about the ease with which he removed Newsom's gleaming mask, revealing the hollow person concealed beneath the performance. And he accomplished all of this without exerting much effort. The quintessential wolf in sheep's hair gel is voters. Simply observe his responses to the challenging questions. Do you have any other questions? Yes, Governor. Well, there is a serious homelessness issue in California. Why do you suppose that is? I appreciate that inquiry, you know. Additionally, I believe it depends on one's point of view. Let's take a different approach to that. All right, let's look at that from a different angle. I mean, I see an outdoorsman, and you see a homeless man. I'm really glad that so many Californians may benefit from the abundance of natural habitat in this state. Okay, on to the next query. He revealed a man who is obsessed with the camera, who uses a wagging finger to chastise entire states, and who creates a national image by feigning anger and staged outrage. Not even a second was spared for Gavin Newsom, the walking advertisement for style over substance. Gutfeld exposed the unvarnished reality behind the shine and lustrous hair, a headline-grabbing political mannequin that is too fragile to withstand the harsh realities of life. He took advantage of Newsom's irrational aspirations, the unspoken murmurs that the White House was the target of this California prince. He also dismantled the idea that a governor in charge of a failing state could conceivably market the same turmoil to the rest of the country. With merciless accuracy, it was comedic gold. A deeper crack is seen with each strike. Clarity, not malice, was what caused it to sting. The kind of clarity that is so unquestionable that it cuts. The same lethal message was conveyed by every smile, every punch, and every well-timed pause. Leadership was not demonstrated here. It has to do with branding. And in front of millions of spectators, that brand was crumbling beneath the crushing weight of its own lies. Gutfeld didn't require shouting or showmanship. He only allowed reality to strike the hammer, shattering the meticulously constructed facade that Newsom had spent years creating, leaving him reeling in the fallout. With the limelight in one hand and the broken remnants of Gavin's image in the other, Gutfeld ultimately emerged as the truth-bearer.